We begin my top 36 remaining running back rankings with running backs that I think are probably mid to low end RB3s this week. We have Jalen Warren, Justice Hill, Tajay Spears, Tyler Algier, Jaleel McLaughlin, Emmanuel Wilson, Braylon Allen, and Alexander Madison. Jalen Warren isn't really a good fit in this Arthur Smith scheme. He loves to use Najee Harris. He likes more of the power back. We saw that with the Algier and Bijan Robinson last year. And so I do think that he gets a couple grabs, but I don't think he's a high upside option this week. Justice Hill, I do expect the Ravens and Commanders to be passing a lot in this game. I think that really Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels get a lot of rushing this game. I think Zay Flowers on the Ravens side gets most of the receiving work. And so I do think that Justice Hill gets a couple receptions out of the backfield, but I don't think this is a huge game for him. Tajay Spears really isn't a very high upside play on a week to week basis. Tony Pollard possesses a lot more upside. Tajay Spears isn't really a good goal line option for them. And so I do think, though, even though it's a great matchup against the Indianapolis Colts, I don't think he has a particularly great week. I think just like with the rest of these running backs below him, he gets a couple grabs, and so it gives him a safe floor. He's a decent bet any given week to get 10, but there's not much more upside generally. Tyler Algier, I think, will be quite efficient in an easy matchup against the Panthers on the ground. I just don't think he gets much receiving work, and I don't think he scores. Jaleel McLaughlin plays the Chargers this week. He did have a good game last week in the sense of he got a touchdown, but he was quite inefficient on the ground and through the air. I do think it's a quite tough week for him, but I think he gets a couple receptions. Emmanuel Wilson, it is a good matchup against the Cardinals. I think Josh Jacobs is generally going to be the running back that gets a lot of work, though. And so I do think that he is going to be relatively efficient on the ground. I just don't think there's as much opportunity for him this week. Braylon Allen, I think, is going to be a lot more efficient with them demoting Hackett, but I think Breece Hall is going to get more work with that demotion. And so I do think that he gets a couple grabs, and I think he's quite efficient on the ground. I just don't think he gets a touchdown, and thus I don't see him being much more than a general RB3. And Alexander Madison does appear to be the best bet from a week to week basis out of the Raiders' backfield. It's a tough matchup against Pittsburgh, and so I do think that limits his upside, but I think he gets enough usage to be a solid RB3. Running backs that I think are probably high end RB3s this week are Austin Eckler, Chase Brown, Jerome Ford, and J.K. Dobbins. Austin Eckler, this projection is with B Rob not playing. It's just such a tough matchup against Baltimore that I think that he gets a couple grabs. I just don't think he's very efficient on the ground, and so if he doesn't score a touchdown, which I don't project him having, I think that he's a decent floor option, but I just don't see a massive week for him. Chase Brown has been very efficient the past 2 weeks. He is playing through injury this week, though, and so I do think this is a little bit more of a Zach Moss game than it is a Chase Brown game, but he has been very, very good, and he continues to work himself into more of an even timeshare, and so it'll be interesting to see what we see from him this week. Jerome Ford is playing Philly. He's been pretty disappointing from a fantasy perspective, really, but against Philly, I do think they'll be behind in this game, and so I do think he gets a couple of grabs, and I think he's a safe floor option. I just don't think this is a ceiling game. J.K. Dobbins is playing Denver. This isn't an easy matchup by any means, but I do think that they're going to stay devoted to the run game, and I think he gets a good amount of volume, and it's going to be a relatively low-scoring game between these two teams. And so I do think that while he's a very safe floor play, I don't think we see one of those 20-point games we saw at the beginning of the season from him. All right, so as I was making this video, Devin Singletary was declared out, and so I had to readjust some rankings. And so Tyron Tracy, I have now moved up to 24 overall. I do think that he was a little bit more efficient last week than he's generally going to be on a week-to-week basis, but I could definitely be wrong, and this would be a great opportunity for him. I don't think in general he's going to be able to completely remove Devin Singletary because they gave him that contract. I think he's kind of stuck the next 2 years there. But I think it's a pretty high upside possibility for him this week against Cincinnati. And I do think he gets a lot of work this week. I think Eric Gray could potentially get some work too. Javonte Williams has a tough matchup against the Chargers, but in general, the past couple of weeks with Beatty out, he's been the RB to own. He gets a lot of the receiving work. And so even in a tough matchup, I think he's a good floor play. Trey Sermon, it's a tough matchup against the Titans. With Taylor out, though, he's going to be the primary running back. I just don't think that the offense is going to be as efficient on the ground with Flacco as it would be with A-Rich, although that's good for the passing game. And so I think that it's kind of a tough week, but I think due to volume, he's going to be safe enough to start. In general, is a low end RB2 to a high end RB3. Tank Bigsby has looked awesome. I want to see one more week of him massively outproducing Travis Etienne on the ground to firmly put him over Etienne in weekly rankings, because Etienne does get a lot of the receiving work. And so I do think he's a great start this week with a lot of upside. It's just, it is a little bit risky. Zach Moss, I think with Chase Brown being hurt, is going to get a little bit more run this week. It's a middle of the road matchup against the Giants. I don't think he scores, but I think he gets a couple of receptions, is efficient through the air, and is somewhat efficient on the ground. Rico Dowdle has been awesome lately. Against Detroit, though, it is a brutal matchup. And so I don't think he's going to be that efficient, but I think he's going to get a lot of volume, quite a few receptions. And I do think they have to pass to stay in this game against the Lions. And ETN, he hasn't even been really that inefficient in general on the ground, most weeks at least. It's just that Bigsby has been so much more efficient that it's kind of made him look as though he's not that great. But through the air, he's been awesome. I think he holds on to that role. I just think that there's the risk that he starts seeing less and less of a percentage of the carries. And so I think this will be a pivotal week. And what happens on the ground here, I think, could dictate what we see from them in the future. If you like what you're hearing and seeing so far, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel. For better or worse, I try to project out all of the NFL games with the exception of teams on bye weeks or the Thursday night games. And so yeah, I'm going to be right about some things and incorrect about other things. But yeah, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, feel free to like and subscribe. Thanks. Running backs that I think are probably mid RB2s to potentially low end RB1s are Antonio Gibson, James Cook, Najee Harris, David Montgomery, Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, and James Conner. Antonio Gibson is slated to get the full workload this week. It's a middle-of-the-road matchup against Houston. It's really hard to project the Patriots this week with Drake May. I don't know how efficient the offense is going to look. Is it going to look better? Is it going to look worse? Either way, I think he's going to get a couple of grabs, as I think Drake May is going to try to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible. And so I don't think he scores, but I think he is going to be a very safe floor option because I think he gets a couple grabs. James Cook is playing the Jets this week. It's a tough draw. I don't think he scores a touchdown, but I think he's safe because he's going to be involved in the passing game. I don't think he's going to be quite as efficient on the ground, and so for that reason, I think he's more of a mid RB2 than he would be a high end RB2 to low end RB1 this week. Najee is playing the Vegas Raiders. He hasn't had a good game yet this year, but I do think he scores a touchdown in this one, and I do think that he's a little bit more efficient on the ground. I just don't think, until we really see a ceiling game, that he potentially has one this year. Arthur Smith's offense has not been very good. Justin Fields for fantasy has been pretty good recently, but yeah, the offense does not look good. It is a plus matchup though, and so I do think he's going to be more efficient in general. I just, once again, don't think we see a massive ceiling game. David Montgomery is playing Dallas. I do think, while I don't project him to score a touchdown, I think he's going to be insanely efficient on the ground, as I think Jahmyr Gibbs will be as well. And so I think he's a strong start this week, and if he does happen to score a touchdown, I think he's going to finish much higher than this. Bucky Irving is playing the Saints. This projection is with Rachaad White missing this game. I think he's a very good floor play. I don't know about the ceiling. He could finish much higher than this. It's a little bit tough, but I think that you could definitely do worse. I think that he's probably an RB2. It's just, once again, it is a little bit tough to project because we haven't seen what a full workload of him looks like. Josh Jacobs is playing the Cardinals. It's a plus matchup. I don't think he scores, but I think he's very efficient on the ground, and I think he does get a couple of catches from Jordan Love. Tony Pollard is playing the Indianapolis Colts. I don't really like the Titans' offense this week in general, even though they're playing the Colts, but I do like Tony Pollard. I think he's going to be pretty efficient, and I do have him scoring a touchdown. James Conner is playing the Packers this week. There's better and worse matchups, but James Conner is James Conner. He's a must start every single week. I think he's a low end RB1 this week due to volume alone. I don't have him scoring a touchdown, but I think he's involved in the passing game, and I think he's going to be really efficient on the ground. Running backs that I think are probably safe RB1s, but I don't really think are threats to be the RB1 overall, are Joe Mixon, Chuba Hubbard, DeAndre Swift, and Bijan. Joe Mixon, I'm so excited to finally see him back in action. I think that he in general is going to help the offense of the Texans be a lot more efficient. And so I do think he has a fantastic game. I do think he scores a touchdown, and I think he's a very strong start against the Patriots. Chuba Hubbard is playing the Falcons. I don't think he's going to score a touchdown, but I think he's going to be very involved in the passing game. I think they're going to be trailing. And so I love Chuba Hubbard. I think he's also going to be pretty efficient on the ground as well. DeAndre Swift is playing Jacksonville. He's been awesome recently after being unstartable in basically every format the first couple weeks. I love the Bears offense this week. In plus matchups, I'm going to be pretty high on them. It's just when we get tougher matchups, I'm not going to like the Bears offense quite as much. But I think against Jacksonville, he's a fantastic start. He has PPR upside, especially because we've seen that even in the preseason to this past week, when DeAndre Swift is involved in the screen game, good things happen. And so I think they're going to keep doing that because I think they're going to try to continue doing whatever works for them. Bijan Robinson draws the Panthers this week. It's about as good of a matchup as you could possibly want. Bijan Robinson has been disappointing for us in fantasy, but it's really the utilization. It's mind-boggling. I mean, with Arthur Smith, we could understand, hey, this guy just doesn't know what he's doing. He's ignoring London, Pitts, and Robinson and featuring practice squad players. But it's still been disappointing for Robinson. I don't understand it. He's looked so good on film. He's decisive. He has amazing vision. His juke move is just about the best, if not the best, in the NFL. He's awesome in the passing game. And so while he's been a very safe floor option, we just haven't seen a ceiling game. I do think he scores the ever so elusive touchdown this week, however. And so for that reason, I do think he's a strong start. Running backs that I have as top 5 options that I think are definite threats to be the RB1 overall this week are Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall, and Alvin Kamara. Saquon is playing against Cleveland. You could ask for a better matchup, but it could definitely be worse. I think that with the return of Brown and Smith on the outside, that makes his life a lot easier and allows him to be more efficient. I do have him scoring a rushing touchdown, and he is an absolute threat to be the RB1 overall. I think the entire offense in general, as long as everyone stays healthy, is going to continue to roll. And so I love him rest of season. Derrick Henry came back down to earth just a little bit after 2 incredible weeks. It's a plus matchup. I think he scores a touchdown yet again. And I think he's a very strong start in every single format. I just think that there are better options this week, although there's not very many. Jahmyr Gibbs is playing Dallas. I think he has a fantastic game. I have him scoring a touchdown. I think he's going to be finally utilized through the air after 2 weeks of not really getting any targets. And so I love him this week. Breece Hall is playing Buffalo. It is the easiest matchup you can draw. I think that with Nathaniel Hackett being demoted, this entire offense in general is going to be much more efficient. And I think that Breece Hall, out of everyone on this entire offense, is the biggest beneficiary of that demotion. Alvin Kamara is playing Tampa Bay this week. I think that with Spencer Rattler starting, they're going to try to get him involved heavily on the ground. And then I also think they're going to try to get the ball out of Rattler's hands quickly, which I think also benefits Kamara. And so I think he has a ton of receptions this week, and I do think he scores a rushing touchdown. And so to conclude, running backs that I think are probably mid to low end RB3s this week are Jaylen Warren, Justice Hill, Tyjae Spears, Tyler Algier, Jaleel McLaughlin, Emmanuel Wilson, Braylon Allen, and Alexander Madison. Running backs that I think are probably high end RB3s this week are Austin Eckler, Chase Brown, Jerome Ford, and J.K. Dobbins. Running backs that I think are probably mid to low end RB2s this week are Tyrone Tracy, Javonte Williams, Trey Sermon, Tank Bigsby, Zach Moss, Rico Dowdle, and Travis Etienne. Running backs that I think are probably mid RB2s to potentially low end RB1s are Antonio Gibson, James Cook, Najee Harris, David Montgomery, Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, and James Conner. Running backs that I think are safe RB1s, but I wouldn't project to reasonably be the RB1 overall, are Joe Mixon, Chuba Hubbard, DeAndre Swift, and Bijan. And then running backs that I think are decent bets to be the RB1 overall this week are Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall, and Alvin Kamara. All right, so who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Am I missing somebody from this list entirely? Let me know below in the comment section and let me know why. With that being said, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you, and have a good day.